Shalom, Israel, Royal House of David. Let's give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Ba'ashem HaMashiach Yahweh Shah, Ba'ashem HaKadosh, all praises due. Barakatha Yahweh, Barakatha Yahweh Shah, Barakatha Yahweh, Barakatha Yahweh Shah, Barakatha Yahweh, Ba'ashem HaMashiach Yahweh Shah, all praises due. Peace and blessings, family. I know last time we talked about, this place, being spiritual Egypt. And first and foremost, double honors to KD, the water for all the truth, all the edification, man, we received over the years. Truly has made, me a better man, and, really sparked that light in my heart. So, talked about, spiritual Egypt. On the other end, this place is also spiritual Sodom. I know it's plain as day, really show how much of a wicked, place this is. And I'm just going to look into what Sodom is, what a Sodomite is. We know, man, it's all in the schools, and the agenda is against the kids. I mean, it's against everybody, but going after the kids, man, is one of their main agendas. And as you see now, in the news, there's articles everywhere, even videos, man. You have, this perverse spirit that's pushed in our schools, and they teaching about transgenderism and changing genders and all manner of wickedness. And saw an article not too long ago that that touches on that, how these pedophiles, man, they try to twist everything for their desires, like classify themselves as like minor attracted people, and it's all of that perverse spirit. And so let's just start out by looking at what a sodomite is. And this is just right off Adam Online. This is a sodomite. It's one who practiced sodomy, resident of biblical Sodom. General term of abuse. So let's look at Sodom. So sodomite is a original resident of Sodom. Sodom was a wicked or corrupt place from the sinful city of ancient Palestine, said to have been destroyed from neighboring Gomorrah by fire from heaven. And so we know that the Most High destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. It was 5 cities, and in total, and because of their perverseness. And it's the same perverseness that's around now. But let's go into the book of Jasher and just look at some of the the earliest information that we have on this type of behavior. It's the book of Jasher, chapter 18. I'm gonna just start at verse 11. Jasher 18 and 11. In those days, all the people of Sodom and Gomorrah and of the whole 5 cities were exceedingly wicked and sinful against the Lord. And they provoked the Lord with their abominations, and they strengthened in aging abominably and scornfully before the Lord. And their wickedness and crimes were in those days great before the Lord. And they had in their land a very extensive valley, about a half a day's walk, and in it there were fountains of water and a great deal of herbage around the water. All the people of Sodom and Gomorrah went there 4 times in a year. Went there 4 times in a year with their wives and children, all belonging to them. And they rejoiced there with timbrels and dances. And in the time of rejoicing they would rise and lay hold of their neighbors' wives, and some, the virgin daughters of their neighbors, and they enjoyed them. And each man saw his wife and daughter in the hands of his neighbor, and did not say a word. And they did so from morning to night, and they afterward returned home, each man to his house, and each woman to her tent. So they always did 4 times a year. So in the modern time, you would look at, it's a couple things there, they was passing their daughters around, they sharing each other's wives, and that sounds like swinging to me, in a modern day, but it's just all manner of wickedness. And that's some of the earliest stuff. And so that's a sodomite spirit. They actually had days where they would, set aside to go do this. So they planned the wickedness. They desired it. I'm going to get another example. It's the same chapter. Let's pick up in 16. Jasher 18, verse 16. Let's keep reading. Also, when a stranger came into their cities and brought goods, which he had purchased with a view to dispose of them, the people of these cities would assemble men, women, and children, young and old, and go to the man to take his goods by force, giving a little to each man until there was an end to all the goods of the owner which he had brought into the land. And if the owner of the goods quarreled with them, saying, "What is this work which you have done to me?" then they would approach to him one by one, and each would show him the little which he took, and taunt him, saying, "I only took the little which thou didst give me." And when he heard this from them all, he would arise and go from them in sorrow and bitterness of soul, when they would all arise and go after him and drive him out of the city with great noise and tumult. And so that's kind of like extortion. They a stranger coming in and, looking for comfort or whatever, and maybe place of refuge. They took him from everything he got. And most likely for them to continue to fund, what they like to do 4 times a year, and, all manner of wickedness, and they influence the children, women, to do the same thing. And so, that's extortion, to take everything from somebody and then taunt them with it. It's just an evil spirit, And so, Sodomites back then, man, it's the same way now. For example, the Black Lives Matter. That's a organization that's run by Sodomites, run by a perverse spirit. Man with man, woman with woman. They run it. It's full of it. And what they do, they do extortion. It's modern day extortion. They get people to donate all this money and all that, and they use the money to, continue to, fund their parties and gatherings, events, stuff that they do. And I'm not approving Black lives at all. I mean, neither can it. I mean, there's no truth in it. There's no Most High in it. None of them are elect. So it's just a perverse spirit. And so we know they, main identification of a Sodomite is somebody that just live sexually immoral, in every type of way, and really is all around immoral. No knowledge of the Most High, no desire to know Him either. And so let's push forward a little bit just to see what the Most High, did to these 5 cities. It's Jasher chapter 19. Let's go to Jasher chapter 19. We'll start at verse 51. Then the Lord rained upon Sodom and Gomorrah and upon all these cities brimstone and fire from the Lord out of heaven. And he overthrew these cities, all the plain and all the inhabitants of the cities, and that which grew up upon the ground. And Ado, the wife of Lot, looked back to see the destruction of the cities, for her compassion was moved on account of her daughters who remained in Sodom, for they did not go with her. And when she looked back, she became a pillar of salt, and it is yet in that place until this day. And it's still there to this day. That's why over there was Sodom and Gomorrah at over there in the Middle East. Nothing can still grow in the ground. It's full of sulfur and brimstone to this day. Verse 54. And the oxen which stood in that place daily licked the salt to the extremities of their feet, and in the morning it would spring forth afresh, and they again looked it up unto this day. And Lot and 2 of his daughters that remained with him fled and escaped to the cave of Adullam, and they remained there for some time. And so, Lot and 2 of his daughters were able to escape. His wife, she was worried about the things that was behind, and continued to look back and was turned into that salt. So the Most High burnt Sodom and Gomorrah and those other cities up because of that perverse Sodomite spirit there. And the Sodomites always had a tendency to pop, back up, and it's a way of life that was always there, through, remnant all through the book of Kings. And I'm gonna look at a couple example, in First Kings and then Second Kings, and it just shows how that Sodomite spirit is always somewhere around. And these are the people that just don't, desire any knowledge of the Most High, no fear of him at all. He's not in their heart and know which way. And so let's go to First Kings chapter 14. First Kings chapter 14. I'm gonna start at verse 21. And Rehoboam, the son of Solomon, reigned in Judah. Rehoboam was 41 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 17 years in Jerusalem, the city which the Lord did choose out of all the tribes of Israel, to put his name there. And his mother's name was Naamah, an Ammonitess. And Judah did evil in the sight of the Lord, and they provoked him to jealousy with their sins which they had committed above all that their fathers have done. For they also built them high places and images and groves on every high hill and under every green tree. And there were also Sodomites in the land, and they did according to all the abominations of the nations which the Lord cast out before the children of Israel. So the Sodomites was always cast out, and they always try to return, and they did all the abominations of all the nations. So they had no restraint. They morally unrestrained. They have no shame, they have no fear of the Most High. And so they do that very proudly. Hence why they're a Sodomite, their whole movement talks about what? Pride. Let's get another example just to show how the Sodomites was always lingered around like pests. Let's go to 2 Kings. 2 Kings chapter 23. 2 Kings chapter 23, I'm going to start at verse 1. And the king sent, and they gathered unto him all the elders of Judah and of Jerusalem. And the king went up into the house of the Lord, and all the men of Judah and all the inhabitants of Jerusalem with him, and the priests and the prophets and all the people, both small and great. And he read in their ears all the words of the book of the covenant which was found in the house of the Lord. And the king stood by a pillar and made a covenant before the Lord to walk after the Lord, and to keep his commandments and his testimonies and his statutes with all their heart and all their soul, to perform the words of this covenant that were written in this book. And all the people stood to the covenant. And the king commanded Hilkiah, the high priest, and the priests of the second order, and the keepers of the door, to bring forth out of the grove for all the host of heaven. And he burnt them without Jerusalem in the fields of Kedron, and carried the ashes of them unto Bethel. Salah. Let me read verse 4 again. And the king commanded Hilkiah the high priest, and the priests of the second order, and the keepers of the door, to bring forth out of the temple of the Lord all the vessels that were made for Baal, and for the grove, and for the host of heaven. And he burnt them without Jerusalem in the fields of Kedron, and carried the ashes of them unto Bethel. And so this is just a form of idolatry here, vessels made for Baal. So it just shows, the wickedness that were in these Israelite men were, partaking in. Look at verse 5. And he put down the idolatrous priests, whom the kings of Judah had ordained to burn incense in the high places in the city of Judah, and in the places round about Jerusalem. Them also that burned incense unto Baal, the sun, and the moon, and the planets, and to all the hosts of heaven. And he brought out the grove from the house of the Lord without Jerusalem unto the brook Kedron, and burnt it at the brook Kedron, and stamped it small to powder, and cast the powder thereof upon the groves of the children of the people. And so, this was, the king commanded that all this idolatrous stuff be put down. It was, wickedness was arising. This, when the kingdom was split into two, idolatry was, at an all-time high. And look at verse 7. And he brake down the houses of the Sodomites that were by the house of the Lord, where the women were hanging for the grove. And so the Sodomites, in the midst of all this evilness and stuff, the Sodomites are still there. And they believe they practice all manner of wickedness, all these idolatrous work, unrestrained. They have no limit. And so I touched on these, just to show that, Sodomites are always, around, and that's why it's good to, especially for the children and right, for the nation, period, to be aware of a Sodomite spirit, and, that's what we stay away from, so just showing the consistency, and it always was a effort, we took an effort to stamp out the residue of them, and they come back every generation. They had no desire of the Most High at all. Let's look at and see the Most High say, and this is Leviticus 18, and this is just a verse about sexual immorality. Leviticus 18:22 say, "Thou shalt not lay with mankind as with womankind; it is abomination." Straight like that. So simple and plain. And I'm gonna get one more. This is Deuteronomy 23:17. "There shall be no whore of the daughters of Israel, nor a sodomite of the sons of Israel." And so the Most High gave us instructions, how to live, and specific instructions about sodomite. They have no place in the house of the Lord. And this country, man, this nation, and really the world out here, they go to lengths to try to protect the rights of this perverse spirit that lingers around throughout all these generations. And even the won't do it, they accept them. You might have a couple that say no, they ain't right and all that, but for the most part, the church house try to accept everybody. And it's not sound doctrine in there. Most High is not in those church houses. And so, they do that, by just, I even heard this, that we don't live by the Levitical laws anymore. All that was fulfilled on the cross. Well, yes, the law of Moses was fulfilled on the cross, but that was not saying that it was okay to live sexually immoral now. And so that's what I'm gonna look at in the second part of this. I'm gonna come out the Old Testament and just show, how the Sodomites was always here, and it's always effort to stamp them out. And just a more in-depth look, we'll go more into the New Testament, because one thing they do, their whole movement is built on pride, right? And we know what the Most High say about pride. Pride will be for destruction, There's nothing godly about that movement, nothing godly about, their lifestyle. And so, and even the symbol they use, I'm going to touch on that as well, because we know, that the bow, the rainbow, that's the Lord's. That's the Lord's sign of his covenant, It's supposed to be a godly thing, a holy thing, but they use it and twist it and use it for wickedness. So, all right, I love y'all, and I'm gonna go ahead and cut this here. I'll come back and touch on part 2 when we go into more into the New Testament and talk about the bow a bit. Let's give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bashem, Hamashiach, Yahweh Shah, Bashem, Rakakadash, all praises due. Shalom.